So, some big news in Texas. And hello again. It's me. It's been a minute. I know. I have just not had much interesting to talk about for the last couple months, or maybe the last month or so. But now there's some interesting developments, some things I really want to talk about here. Firstly, starting off with the Texas primaries that happened yesterday, and Ken Paxton, the biggest winner here. A couple of them that we didn't get, but it was okay. It is what it is. But the big one, of course, is Ken Paxton, and it was pretty much a blowout of John Cornyn. I mean, it was a substantial win. It was called fairly early. It was really no contest at all. Now, the big thing, one of the things here, there's a couple little things in this, and of course with Thomas Massey that happened a week or so ago. There's something very interesting that this stuff is telling you. Now, before I do that, I just want to point out. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to do that right now. Actually, let's do this in order. Let's try at least try to do it in order. The interesting thing about this is I just saw a Fox News clip about this race, and according to Fox News, every single candidate that Trump has backed in this primary, this 2026 primary, they've all won. Now they haven't all been blowouts like Ken Paxton versus John Cornyn here, but they've all won. Now, what does that tell you? That seems to tell me that all this talk from guys like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and that they have this big following on social media and stuff and whatever. That's there. This whole talk about there's this new right kind of thing like that, and it's taking over the Republican Party. And look, there's no doubt that there's a certain amount of clout with this group, sure, but with these primaries and Trump just winning his candidates, winning all of them, it is to me, it is showing that a lot of this talk from Tucker Carlson was just not true. That they're that or guys like him and stuff, that there's a this new wave. It's actually not as big. It doesn't have as much clout as seems to have been portrayed. Imagine that. It's almost like it's another internet based psyop. Interesting. Imagine that. So, who'd have seen that coming? Yeah. Um. So there you go. Now, the other interesting thing about this, and this goes to what I want to talk about next, the conspiracy theories. Israel, Israel's they won with Thomas Massey's race, and that's they're it's all Israel. You know. Okay, well, how do we figure this? Because John Cornyn was actually backed by APAC, and he spent way more money than Ken Paxton did. So you you have the APAC backed candidates versus the Trump backed candidate. And I thought, wait a minute, hold on. I thought APAC was, hey, Trump was working for Israel. He's essentially made the United States military a mercenary army for Israel, guns for hire, and they're doing Israel's bidding in Iran right now and in the Middle East. They've been doing it for over 30 or 40 some odd years, and blah 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 blah. All this crazy stuff. And yet we have this. Like, how do we square that triangle? I mean, um, how do we do that? So there you go. That's one thing. All right. So that kind of leads me into something else I wanted to talk about here. Conspiracy theories. I saw this post the other day. I was jumping on social media, sort of just to really quickly check a message, and I just happened to come across this post right here. I don't really know who James Lindsay is. I've heard of him before, but I don't follow him. But I just saw this, and he's got a screenshot here of Alex Jones quoting Joel Webbon, and it's apparently this is a quote from Joel Webbon: "Communism, Marxism, transgenderism, they were all disproportionately pushed by Jews." And Joel Webbon here, it says Joel Webbon addresses how Israel was involved in major leftist movements worldwide before capturing the American right with Christian Zionism. And James Lindsay is quoting this saying, rock effing bottom. I guess Alex Jones, who's now jumped on the, uh, this woke right bandwagon, whatever the heck it is. Um, and there you go. So I read this. I looked at this and I was like, Joe Webman addresses how Israel was involved in major leftist movements worldwide before capturing the American right with Christian Zionism. I don't listen to Webman on a regular basis. I'll be honest. I'll admit it. I've heard some of his stuff. But look, I know guys. I've been to one of his conferences. I've been to the very first one of his new sort of big conferences, his annual conferences. I've been to that one. I never met him. Um, but I gotta say, I've always just sort of, even when I was sitting there at the conference, I've always just had this sort of weird feeling about the guy. There was just something about him that I was just like, I don't know. But I don't want to go too far into that. It just rubbed me kind of the wrong way. Um, but I've heard some of his stuff. I've heard him talk a few times, and I just honestly think I really just think he's overrated. I don't think he's really as. I don't want to say he's not smart. I just don't think it's hard to say. It's hard to exactly explain what it is. But I do think he's just overrated. It's almost like he's trying too hard to be smart, and you just kind of like miss just the simple stuff, you know. Um, but because I look at this stuff and I'm like, what? Where is the proof for this? Like, what? When you say Israel is behind all of this stuff, where is where? And look, Alex kind of sort of misrepresents Webben here because Webben says it's pushed by Jews. Alex says Israel did it. There's a difference between a nation and an ethnic people who usually identify with that particular nation. There's a difference between the two, okay? So I replied to one of these comments, and it's fascinating. It was this guy right here, this guy named Corey Austin McDowell. And he said here, you can call him what you want, but you can't prove him wrong because you know it's true. I replied to this and I said, if you notice, there's no replies, by the way, because he deleted the comments. I just looked here. I wanted to find it. I wanted to read this stuff. And he deleted the comments. He deleted the whole thing because I had a couple of replies on this. People came at me and stuff. So interesting that he deleted it. However, I happen to have taken a screenshot. And I'm going to pull some of those up right here. Um, this was one of the guys who replied to me in that comment section because I basically what I said was the comment I made to him, this Corey guy. I said, "How do you disprove a negative? You can't disprove a negative. Um, I can't I can't. How do I do it? Because he's the one making the claim. He's the one who said Israel is behind all these things. He's the one who's got to prove it. And so I had a couple of comments back and forth with this Corey guy, and I was saying, look, dude, like, so I asked him. I said, do you have like, can you so you can give me actual documentation, actual like real documents that prove that Israel has been colluding to create communism, Marxism, or just the Jews in general, I guess, whatever. They've been doing all this stuff all this time. You can give me actual documented proof. And he's like, yes, it's documented. And I'm like, okay, well then can you show? But can you give me the documents that show that what Webben just said up here, is well, I mean, there's truth to what Webben says. Okay, there is actually truth to it. But see, of course, Alex Jones turns it into Israel, and that's one of the problems here. And we're gonna get into this a little bit here. But so can you prove that? And then of course, he provides none of it. And one guy says here, this is what this one other guy says. He says Karl Marx was Jewish and invented communism. Trotsky was Jewish. Zinoviev was Jewish. Kamenev was Jewish. Lenin and Stalin had Jewish ancestry. And on and on and on and on. He says, I'm not even claiming this to be a negative. I'm just simply stating facts. His claim that Jews were disproportionately, the key word denotes overrepresentation in communists. Now, look, to that comment, see, like, this is the thing. I was kind of getting into this stuff myself for a while. Yeah, I was I was looking into history and I was reading stuff and I was like it's really weird that a lot of these guys are Jewish. You know, these guys with these big major movements, left wing movements, they're Jewish. Karl Marx, yes, he was Jewish. Yeah, you know that's undisputed facts. And so he's actually kind of right here. But the problem is the big problem is despite what he's saying here, and again, that's it's weird. It is kind of weird. And I told a friend of mine this one time. I was like, yeah, it is it's kind of weird. You know, it's very bizarre. I've never went from there to say, well, then it must be a conspiracy by the Jews to take over the world and promote Zionism. I've never gone that far. Like that's where the leap comes in. That's where it's like, okay, whoa, hold up, okay, how did you get that? I mean, look, I get that could be a logical, perhaps, conclusion of some kind, but you still need a little bit more than that. You need a little bit more than these kind of facts. And so I replied to him, and I said, again, the comment section is deleted now, but I replied to him. I said, yes, these are true. Sure, yeah, it's true, but that doesn't prove that there's this grand conspiracy by Jewish people to rule the world in some Illuminati plot. That's not that doesn't prove that. Okay, that is as far as I'm concerned at this point what you typically call like a non sequitur. Um, the post hoc, no, was it the post hoc fallacy? I get my fallacies confused here. Let's look it up over here. Whoops. Um, I think it's this one, the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Not interested. So it's a Latin phrase translated after this, therefore because of this. You know, it is an informal logical fallacy where someone assumes that because event B occurred after event A must have caused event B. Or basically, it is just a conclusion that's sort of preemptively drawn. That doesn't prove really this conspiracy theory idea. Yes, it's very weird. I'll give it to you. It's very odd, but it just doesn't actually like prove really anything. So that was that one, and then here's the comment from the actual guy making the post. This was one of his replies to me after our back and forth. He says, "And again, it's not my burden to provide you verifiable historical facts. It's your burden to prove otherwise. If you're attempting to reject such facts, I have absolutely no need to provide anything to you. Need I remind you," this is where he gets condescending to me. "This need I remind you, you have a device in your hand this very moment that practically all human knowledge," by the way, I was replying to this on my computer, but whatever. "That practically all human knowledge is accessible from. I suggest you use it and stop depending on others to inform you. Grow up, kid." um, I laugh at things like that. They kind of make me laugh. But so I was like, I replied to him and said, "That's not how this works. You are the one making the claim, along with Webben and Jones, that Israel is involved directly with verifiable evidence, liberal movements." I didn't write that very well. But it's up to you to provide to prove it, sir. You don't get to sit here and pretend like this conspiracy theory is as common news as the sky is blue. Now, I should correct myself here a little bit here because it was Jones who said that Webben said how Israel is behind all this stuff. Webben didn't actually say that, at least according to the quotes. So I have to correct myself a little bit there. But we know what they ultimately mean, right? I mean, Webben he's going to point the fingers at Israel, and all these guys are going to do that. So it's not too big of a correction. In which again, I asked the question: what is the proof? What is your proof of this? Why I you know, um, the, really honestly, guys, I just I go around and I ask people these questions over and over and over again, and I never get any actual. I get the comments. I get they showed me there. I get the well, Marx was Jewish, Trotsky was Jewish. These communists, they're all Jewish, and but that's not proof. That's not proof. That what is that? All that tells me is that a lot of these guys happen to be Jewish. You know, they happen to have Jewish ancestry of some kind. And it's not totally unusual Given, especially given the fact that, look, here's the thing. Here's some history for us all to consider. Jews have historically been involved in finance. Okay, yeah, that's true. Now, is that because they go, hey, let's restore Zionism, and we're going to do that by taking over the financial industry of all these nations, and we're going to make them work for us, and yes, ha 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 ha. No, that's not. There's nothing. No, that's just that's such a leap, guys. I mean, it's hard for me to express how much of a joke it is to make a leap like that from not enough evidence, and how silly you actually look. But no, what happens is, so during the Middle Ages, Christians were not allowed to engage in things like interest. You know, they weren't allowed to borrow or all this kind of stuff. The kind of banking stuff we do today. It was sort of forbidden by the church. But for the Jews, the Jewish people, the Jewish community, that wasn't the case. So they got into that kind of stuff, and so naturally they got pretty wealthy from it. That's just kind of really what it was. They like someone was going to do it basically, and they're the ones who did it. And they're you could argue they're the ones who it was the Jewish community ultimately who invented the modern realm of finance. But that's just them taking advantage of what we didn't really do. That's really all it is. Hey, look, dude, you make a buck, and there you go. It's just good business, really, at the end of the day. Um, it's really what it boils down to. See, guys, it's just really honestly, guys, like Occam's razor. That's my whole thing. Let's just do Occam's razor, simplest explanation. Let's just stick with the simple explanation, and just go with that before we dive into weird, kooky, wacky conspiracy theories that again Webben doesn't prove. No one's actually been able to prove it. At least as far as I can tell, no one's actually been able to provide any substantial evidence. Like, and when I talk about evidence, here's what I'm talking about. For instance, when the CIA launched a coup against the Iranian government after the ousting of the Shah, I think that's the term, the events, the timing events. But after the CIA coup, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, we actually, how do we know that a coup happened? Because we actually have the documents. We have the tangible evidence that that was actually a conspiracy to overthrow the new Iranian government. Like it's then you have the Suez Canal incident, the Suez Canal crisis. Um, um, yeah, Israel colluding with Britain to basically start a false flag so Britain can justify its invasion of Egypt to take over the Suez. We actually have the actual evidence that was actually what was happening. It's there. That's what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about. When I say give me the proof, I want you to show me these actual documents that there's this plot, And I know that's what people are going to say. Well, of course they're not going to let us see it. That's what they wouldn't let us have it. And I say, well, if you don't have that smoking gun, you probably shouldn't walk around saying what Weapon is saying here boldly, what Alex Jones is boldly saying here. You should probably say something like, it's like what I said. It's kind of weird. It's very strange. It's just very interesting that a lot of these guys are Jewish. And it doesn't, of course, that doesn't automatically mean therefore Israel. These are just leaps, just crazy blind leaps that don't have. I'm just saying, guys. I make it no secret. I love history. I love studying history, and I don't study history because I'm trying to prove an agenda or anything like that. It's just because I love it. I just love learning new things. I love learning about history, just for the sake of it. I just want to know history. And so one of my favorite podcasts, of course, is The Rest is History. I love listening to that podcast. They're covering 1915, World War One right now. I just listened to their episode on the sinking of the Lusitania. And of course, they go through the conspiracy theories about the Lusitania sinking that, Winston Churchill behind it all, blah, blah, blah. I know about it because, I have Buchanan's book. I've read articles about Winston Churchill, and I'm not a Winston Churchill fan, But I'm not going to run into, oh, Churchill was truly the he was truly like evil. I don't again, I'm not a Churchill guy, but you don't have to go into he was way wicked evil. You can just go Churchill wasn't as the kind of hero you might say that he's romanticized to be. Dude really goofed up on a lot of things. Made a lot of things, a lot of bad things way worse, okay? Very fair stance, I think. But anyways, they go through these conspiracy theories and how there's really no evidence for these things at all. There's just none. There's just conspiracy theories. And look, guys, I do often indulge in conspiracy theories. I do. They can be fun. They can be fascinating. But at the end of the day, what is the evidence that we actually have for things? That's really what it comes down to. Nothing else for me. And I'm always my ruling principles are Occam's razor. What is the simplest explanation before I jump into, you know, this morning I woke up, my family, my mom, my dad, me, my brother, and my sister. We have our little family group chat thing, and and then we just had a big storm come in through San Antonio last night. Really, I mean, it was pretty quick. It was only about maybe 30 minutes. Well, that's not really fast, but it was a lot of rain, and we suddenly were just getting flash flood warnings. All of us were. And then the next morning, I woke up to a text by my brother. My brother's he's a Nick Fuentes fan. He's all all that stuff like that. The Jews, and I love my brother. Don't get me wrong. I love him. I love him very much. But I very much disagree with him on a lot of this stuff. But he was saying, I woke up to a text message with him basically saying, "I'm convinced this is the cloud seeding." And I read that and I was like, no, that's that. No, we don't gotta go there. Can't I almost said his name. I don't want to say his name. Um, we don't gotta go there. And so I replied to it. I said, well, honestly, really, what it is, it's just it's we have a super El Nino developing in the Pacific, right there by pushing up. It's over there, like the Peru area, South America, and all of it's doing is just pushing moisture up into America. It's the Pacific is getting very warm, and that it's just pushing all that air upwards, and that moisture is coming into Texas, and not just Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and all the Midwestern states. Basically, they're all getting a lot of rain, a lot of moisture, a lot of activity right now. And now that moisture, warm air, it rises, but it also like a lot of humidity just kind of just sits, and it's kind of nasty. And then what always happens is you get like a cold front will come in. These kind of cold fronts kind of sweep through. Now, when we say cold fronts, we're not talking about something that just completely snows everything out. And that's not really what cold fronts always do. They can be very subtle, especially in the summertime. So it comes in, and basically it's just dry air colliding with all that moisture. And the dry air, because it's the colder air is lower, the warmer air kind of rises. So that cold air is coming in, and it's just basically grabbing all that warm air, and it's just shooting it up into the sky, which creates the clouds and creates the thunderstorms. And you see it. You can literally, if you watch lines of storms kind of passing by, you're literally watching the brunt of that cold front pushing through, and it's causing those storms. I mean, that's basically what's happening from a layman's perspective. And it just comes through, and it causes a huge, massive thunderstorm. And then it comes and it goes, and there you go. That's usually basically it. And that's what happened. Because of course we woke up this morning and it was kind of cool outside. Yeah, because a cold front just came in and it just swept all that moisture away. Now it's still pretty warm today, like after the afternoon, but it cleared up a little bit. The sun's coming out now. It's cleared up. Now, see, here's the thing. See, if you actually, that comes from me learning about weather patterns, things like that. My brother doesn't know really, with all the love and respect to him, of course, my brother doesn't really know anything about that stuff. Now, I happen to know about it because I just take I'm fascinated with it. But see, the point is that when you know these things, when you actually study these kinds of things, when someone comes along and starts peddling conspiracy theories, you're just like, no, what? No, actually, it's just this. It's just that's all it is. It's not. You don't got to go to this weird stuff. But that's the thing. Conspiracy theories, they fill in the gap for actually like doing meaningful, rigorous studying of certain topics. When you don't actually do those things and then you try to act like you know what those things are, you're easily susceptible to conspiracy theories. Um, that's my point, is that they tend to arise in people who, I'm not going to say they're dumb, but I am going to say that they're people who are just ignorant and just don't actually take real time to do serious studying of certain topics, like history. Just rigorously studying historical things, documents, and stuff like that. Like I told you, it's like with the Hitler thing. I was making a video about this a little while ago. A lot of people saying that Hitler was really the good guy in World War II, and it's just revisionist history kind of stuff like that. And then he was just the one guy who was catching on to this what's happening right now, the Jews taking over, and that's what he was doing. And it's like you look at that and you just go, well, but here's the problem. I've watched these YouTube videos, these revisionist YouTube videos, downplaying Hitler's racism, and you just go, yeah, the problem is I've read transcripts of Hitler's book Mein Kampf. I read it. I haven't read the whole book, but I read parts of it. It's it's there. The racism is kind of there. It's pretty blatant. His desire to just kill all the Jews. And again, even if it wasn't there, even if that wasn't true, and Hitler was genuinely concerned about a Jewish conspiracy or something like that, you still stuck with the proof. Where's the proof of this? Are there Jewish people, wealthy Jewish bankers involved in a lot of the finance of a lot of nations? Absolutely. Yes, that's true. But does that prove Zionism's trying to take over the world? No, it doesn't. That doesn't follow. It could be a couple of different things. Like I just told you earlier, there's the whole medieval thing. That's a much simpler explanation. You don't need to. You can that explanation stands on its own without the conspiracy theory. And that's my point. If it stands on its own without the additional theories, conspiracy theories, just stick with what stands on its own. Occam's razor, just stick with that. Now, I went way too long on that. I want to talk here about Thomas Massey losing. I didn't mention this the other day because a lot of people are very upset, and I just was like, I don't know if I want to poke the bear here, but I'm going to do it now. Thomas Massey, again, another example that Trumpism is far from dead. It is very much alive. These talks of that Trump is losing his support from his base. Clearly, that's not true, based on these wins. Okay, and again, these are primaries. These aren't the actual election, but still, these are Trump-backed candidates in Republican primaries, and they're all winning. That is telling you something. Okay. Now, with Thomas Massey, look, I just want to say this, and firstly, I want to just once again point at my flag back there. I've been through the libertarian phase. I was libertarian for a while, and I was all about the isolationist, basically mindsets, the sort of borderline isolationist mindset. Who cares what's going on over there? Pat Buchanan's book. Things like who cares whose flag is flying over where. Doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's not our. That's not our concern. Kind of stuff like that. Like the Ron Paul sort of stuff. I was really in that camp for a while because it seemed to make sense. The problem with it is, what's happened with me is I've just again the history, learning history, geopolitics and stuff. Now I want to present this first by saying this. The first thing, superpowers by definition, or maybe not by definition, but it's the essential part of a superpower. To be a superpower, you have to, or a great power, you have to have influence that goes beyond your borders. Because at some point, you're using your resources to maintain your economy and whatever. But to grow even more, you need to expand outward to be a great power and to maintain a great power. Now, the other thing is there are other great powers that are trying to do the exact same thing. And so inevitably, you're in competition with them. Okay. If you fall behind in anything, you're going to lose. And you never know when that great power gets bigger than you and they come marching armies into your territory. That's why it's essential for all these great powers to be in, you hate to say it, but they're in competition with each other. And they do aggressive things, but it's often aggressive things in order to keep the other one in check, to beat them to the punch, as it were. Now, I'm not necessarily just justifying that. I'm just pointing out the truth, just the way things are. It's the way it is. And so, that being said, look at it like this: great powers, they're on the top of the hill. It's like winning a UFC championship belt or a boxing championship belt. When you win that belt, I mean, getting to that belt is hard. It takes a lot of work to get there. But even harder than that is keeping it, because you got a lot of guys underneath you. The top tier guys are coming after that belt. You're no longer fighting the low level guys. You're fighting elite fighters constantly. Staying on that hill is the hardest part. People want that belt. They want to take that away from you. So when you're a great power, it's the same principle. People want to take that away from you. Other great powers want what you have. They want to take your place as the hegemonic power, basically. And for you, you have to view that as a threat, because if they take over, they're going to go even farther, and they're going to try to really um, make you tiny, so that you're no longer a threat to them. And look, guys, that's just the way it is. That is just how it is. And they're superpowers and great powers. They're inevitable. There's always going to be one power, one guy. Yeah, it's like I was. This is a weird example, but it's one of the only ones I got, because I used to go to concerts when I was a little younger, and I used to go to. I never liked to go in the mosh pits, but I was always hanging out around the mosh pit. And one of the reasons why I never want to go in the mosh pit is because you look in there, you're just like, there's always one guy bigger than you. And you don't want to mess with that guy. So that's the point. There's always somebody who's always just the big guy. It's just the way just the way it is. So once you for me, when you accept these facts, when you just let the facts be what they are, you take the Thomas Massey ideals and the Tucker Carlson romantic ideals of we can just share power and we can be peace. We all need to be kumbaya and whatever, blah, 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 blah. You take that romantic idealism and you just throw it out the window because it's just not realistic. You can just basically go on from there and just go, okay, well, superpowers, they're the thing. And they're, empires. I like to call it empires, but empires are a thing. Okay, well, then which empire do I want to be the one that's in control? Well, for me, that's America. I want America to be that power, which means America must be involved in geopolitics. They must be involved in intervention to maintain America's interest, because that is what a great power has to do. They have to do that. If they don't, they won't be a great power anymore. And I look at a lot of the America First guys. I'm like, don't you guys want to make America great, right? Or America First. And the way I look at it, I think I'm more America First, because I want Trump to intervene in Iran. I want Trump to intervene in Venezuela. I want Trump to intervene in Taiwan against China. These kinds of things. I would say I'm more America First than Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Thomas Massey, all these guys. Because it is necessary for the United States to be involved in these things. And I say that, I don't say that like easy. I kind of wish it wasn't this way. When I tell you these things that I'm telling you, it's not like I'm saying these things as if like I enjoy it. I'm just saying to you, this is the way it is. It's just how it is. And misguided idealism and unrealistic idealism doesn't change that. And in fact, sometimes the most dangerous kind of people are idealists. People who just won't face reality for what it actually is. And for me, I look at that and I see Thomas Massey losing, and I'm gonna just say it. I'm glad he lost. I'm glad he lost because as much as I think America First people mean well, they're just misguided. The idea that America can just act like the rest of the world isn't happening, that the Middle East, which 20% of the world's oil supply depends on, to allow that to fall into the hands of either a bunch of crazy Islamists who are bent on Armageddon, and that is documented fact, by the way, that they intend to do that, to allow them to basically hold those resources hostage, or to allow our biggest adversary, China, to take over as the primary influence of that, is an absolute no. That cannot be allowed. It's just we can't let that happen. So we have to do something. As much as you may want to say, I wish and I say it with you. I wish we didn't have to be that way. I wish there was another way to do it. And maybe in the future, who knows? Maybe in the future there is. But right now, that's not what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with, and this is the problem. This is my main problem with the Thomas Massey types. Is you guys just don't understand the actual stakes involved here. And a lot of it's because you people, you're Americans, right? You just go to work, you just do your thing. You got to take care of your families and pay your bills. And I get that. Like that's just you don't want to have to think about what's going on across the world. But that's the problem. That's also the problem at the same time. Is because you don't really know about these kinds of things. You don't know that actually what happens over there in the Pacific, even though it's on the other side of the Pacific, in Taiwan, you've probably never been to Taiwan. I bet you most of us wouldn't even know where Taiwan is, but yet we cannot allow it to fall in the Chinese hands. The reason why is, of course, because Taiwan is the number one producer of all our microchips and electronic gadgets and whatever. That's for these computers, cars, all modern stuff. Getting computers in them depends on those microchips and those things coming from Taiwan. Suddenly, the idea of allowing that to fall in the Chinese hands, can't let that happen. The oil over in the Middle East, and look, guys, look, I'm just gonna say, I'm not a Zionist. I'm the farthest thing. I'm not a dispensationalist by any stretch of the imagination. I don't view Israel today as the God's chosen people. I don't. You can ask my friends; they'll tell you. I have dispensationalist friends. They'll tell you, yeah, Chase isn't. He's definitely. We've gone head to head with Chase on dispensationalism. He's absolutely not a dispensationalist, and he doesn't want people to be dispensationalist. I don't want you to be a dispensationalist. I think it's a flawed system. I really do. But that I also am not a Looney Tune conspiracy theorist. I'm also just very realistic. I'm just facing the facts as they actually are, just with the reality that we're actually dealing with. That's just the way it is, guys. It's just how it is. Tucker Carlson can talk about what he thinks should be, but that's just not reality. And maybe it could get to that one day. Now, you might say, well, Chase, how do we get to that? Well, we get to that by changing the governments of China, of Russia. And how do we do that? Well, there's only one way to really do that. You have to change hearts and minds. And they have to be changed to this. And that's not even just for them, that's for us too. Because in the end, guys, we talk about all this politics and stuff like that. But if we really want to live in the world that Tucker Carlson wants us to live in, and it could maybe happen one day, but it's not going to happen unless it's this. And this is definitely Tucker, as whatever he may want to say. Islam ain't it. Islam is a false religion. It is a false religion. It is an enemy to the West. Now, that does not mean Islamic people. We should love our Islamic neighbors, share the gospel with them. But the idea that they worship the same God and that they love Jesus, that is absolutely false. Okay. So these things, you don't have to be a Zionist to recognize these things. My defense of Israel has nothing to do with a theological belief that they're God's chosen people. It is simply it's all practical to me. Well, we need allies in the Middle East to kind of be sort of you might almost say like a forward operating base for the United States, to maintain its influence over that region because of the oil. Yeah, that's why. That's really what it is. I'm just the guy who's willing to admit that. That's the difference between me and most people. Even people on my side who are Zionist. I'm not going to sit here and go, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the reason the US is over there is because of some theological position. I mean, come on guys. No, it is absolutely ridiculous for a first world modernized country like the United States to base foreign policy on a theological system that is debated. That is suicide. Now, lastly, I'm just going to say this one more quick thing. Thomas Massey and his guys, they want us, the United States, to be in this kind of position where who cares what's going on in the world around us? You know, we should just care about what's happening in the United States and be a totally non-interventionist, pull our troops home, blah blah blah, all this stuff like that, and just focus on the United States alone and act like the world around us isn't happening. Now, this goes back to my point about great powers. Now, what's the opposite of great power? A poor one, a minor power, a sad little power. The only kind of nations or kind of governments the only kinds that actually do that, like just focus on what's going on in their little countries, and the only ones who do that, those are called third world countries because they're way too poor to have influence anywhere else. They don't have the ability to do that. Great powers, like I said, simply by the nature of their existence, will have influence beyond their borders, just the way it is. Um, so I'm just sitting here. So I asked people like Thomas Massey. I'm like, so are you saying, do you want the United States basically to be a third world country? You can't have both. Like I told you, you 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 cannot be a great power, have a great country like the United States, and then act like a third world country. Because if you act like it, you're gonna be one. And I, for one, don't want the United States to be a third world country. So once again, the difference between me and a lot of these other people is I'm just facing the hard facts and the hard truth the way it is. Um, Not letting silly, misguided idealism get in the way of what's actually true. People like Thomas Massey and those people who support him, I think that they do. I think that they allow that stuff to get in the way of honest, sober thinking, of careful, reflective thinking about these things. And I used to be one of them. I told you, I used to be the guy who was like, "Don't tread on me," and just non-interventionalist Ron Paul. I used to be that kind of stuff, but just kind of realized over time, as I'm studying history and other things, that's just it's not realistic. Not in the world we're living in. And again, it can change, but it only changes with the gospel, and that's what we need to do. So, that being said, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. I will talk to you all later. Bye bye.